What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Ranks. This is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Wolfgang Swagger. How you doing today, man?
Here we are, man. The Wolf Gang, it's does it still exist? Because like Tyler kind of co-opted like the Wolf and the golf stuff
Mhm.
into his solo career, even as OF faded away. So I guess Wolfgang's still going from a certain point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as Tyler lives on, there's still an aspect of it going forward. So, if you can't tell, we're talking about Tyler the Creator today, who has dropped a new single, Lumberjack, um, with a video titled Side Streets. There's a lot of clues here. You know, he's headlining Lollapalooza coming up. There's a pretty good chance there's probably an album on the horizon. You know, he drops one every 2 years. Igor was 2019, won the 2020 Grammy. So this is an artist we've been talking about a lot, not only since the pod has started, but also one that we're very excited and always anticipating his work. So we decided we're going to give you all a little break from the week to week breakdowns and do a little nostalgia rankings, which you can check out our Drake rankings, our Quentin Tarantino rankings. Who else have we done?
Jake
Brockhampton.
Brockhampton, J. Cole, Drake, the most recent ones. More on the way, of course, too.
Of
Tons of
course.
things to rank. But I think Tyler's an excellent choice because there's a lot of variety and also quantity. It's a good one.
Yeah. We're going to only be breaking down Tyler solo projects, but, you know, I think it's hard to totally separate, especially the early stuff from the Odd Future influence and collaboration all throughout. So, why don't we just kind of start off? I mean, we've talked about Igor and Flower Boy, gave reviews of those. Check those out, youtube.com/nostalgia pod. But Dave, just overall, how do you consider Tyler as a musician in this day and age?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He's definitely evolved into a more multifaceted artist. Came up as more one note, we'll get into that in a bit, and then slowly transitioned into more, I don't know, acceptable, if you will, lyrics. But then just in general, made rap alongside other stuff, R&B, more funk infused stuff. His production choices have evolved alongside his lyrics. So I view him as like a second tier rapper. He's definitely a upper echelon rapper. He's viewed that way by his peers, but he's also making lots of music that isn't strictly rap, which is really cool. And obviously, that came up when he won the best rap album for Igor at the 2020 Grammys because he thought that remember he had the famous quote about urban is just a politically correct way of saying the N word. Of course, when it comes to genre
Mm-hmm.
classification. So he's seems to be trying to knock down barriers, I guess, or at least his music is just harder to quantify now. But I obviously have a high opinion.
Yeah, he's uh, especially thinking about where how I viewed him when I first heard him, which his early songs, especially I think Yonkers, which is the first one that really like broke through. Obviously, he shortly after that wins the I think 2011 VMAs for Best New Artist, which take the VMAs for what you want. I think there is something to earlier VMAs having some stature in the zeitgeist. At this point, they're pretty much a clown show, but um, you know, Yonkers was this like very strange single for the time because it got labeled as like a horror song, like
Yeah,
horror rap,
horrorcore.
right? And the lyrics obviously are meant to be inflammatory. They're meant to be provocative. It's kind of strange, some of the production on it, and you're just kind of like, how does this guy get to be the guy who makes like Are We Still Friends? Like how does one artist really have these dualities within them, right? And I think that's the especially listening to the discography in preparation for this episode, that's the thing that's really struck me is not only his growth from this very young and very interested in being provocative artist to one that I think is provocative in different ways now, and one that I think is a lot more thoughtful about how he wants to present himself to the world and the art he wants to make. So um, I see him as a really inventive, forward-thinking artist, and even more so a producer at this point. I think that's the other thing is while his rapping ability, um, his lyricism has always kind of been challenging at times, spotty at times. I think I I think the production and the choices he makes and the risks he takes are really really notable. And maybe we can get into that. But when did you first like really tune into Tyler as an artist?
Yeah, I wasn't up on Bastard, which is what, Christmas '09, sometime around Goblin, perhaps when Yonkers
Mhm.
came out as a single. I really don't remember exactly. I do have this vivid memory early on of getting Odd Future and the Atlanta rapper Future confused for a little bit
Yeah.
when I was like 18. Funny enough, because Future was also coming up around the very same time. Yeah, somewhere around the Goblin era, or maybe it was the Radical era. Like as Odd Future also was releasing some group projects, the OF tape in '08, Radical in 2010, and they
Mhm.
repackaged some of those in 2011 as 12 Odd Future songs. So I think reflecting back on when you first heard Tyler, if you were listening to it during the early Odd Future days, also just kind of speaks back to what rap music and music was like at the turn of the decade there at 2010, because that's bling eras has died. We are firmly in the blog era of hip hop, back when blogs had lots of influence. It's funny to listen back to early Tyler and early Odd Future and hear their beef with the rap blog Two Dope Boys, because rap blogs were very influential at the time in terms of keeping you up to date on something, because there was nothing algorithmic like New Music Friday to just feed you the new shit. You had to go seek it out. It's always a funny beef to think about. So, yeah, I think like the very first Odd Future stuff came up on Tumblr, like where it got
Yeah.
noticed and stuff like that, right? So, uh, thinking about them and Tyler, it's very much a pre-streaming thing, but also there was no radio. It's not like Drake came up pre-streaming as well, but he started to get on the radio pretty early on, especially with Thank Me Later. Certainly not the case with Odd Future and
Right.
Tyler. This is underground and also just kind of maligned by the mainstream due to the lyrics and the antics and the comments and everything that went with the Odd Future uh, wave, the noise that it was.
Yeah. Even as you're talking about the come up and the controversy between them and blogs, in Yonkers, obviously we already mentioned it's a breakthrough, but he talks about the line stabbing every blogger with a pitchfork, obviously a shot at blog pitchfork, which has outlasted Two Dope Boys, but still the point stands in all this. And I also started tuning in right around Goblin, and I remember listening to a couple of the more notable tracks off that, but I don't think I ever really like sunk my teeth into the artists of Tyler the Creator fully until Flower Boy was coming out, and went back and listened to some of the earlier albums and tracks that stood out. And re-listening recently, I think I definitely appreciate a little bit more where he's evolved to, especially like going back and listening to Bastard. I think there's a lot of the lot of little seeds of where he's going to go. It's like a 56-minute, I think it's like 13 or 14 track album, but it's a little all over the place at times, which I think you kind of hear in a lot of Tyler's work up until about Flower Boy and Igor. It becomes a lot more focused. But Bastard was a lot more hit and miss for me than I remembered. Um, I still think it's. I think I'm going to caveat this conversation with I don't think there's any really bad albums that we're going to be talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
And this is labeled a mixtape by Tyler himself, but
Yeah,
um,
self-released.
Yeah, but I still think this is probably a little bit lower in my rankings, only because I think you can hear him still figuring it out, but there's still some tracks that really stand out to me. What's your opinion of Bastard? Where are you at with it?
Yeah, so this is probably also notable as one of the more famous, more widely listened to 2000s era mixtapes that's not on streaming at this time. It's been a
Yep.
big thing lately for mixtapes to get their clearances and get put onto streaming to usually a lot of fanfare. It's been anticipated, like, say, Joey Badass's 1999, Chance's Acid Rap, many future mixtapes, etc. But Bastard's not there. And I wonder if Tyler has a lot of interest in this because it's self released, it's all his shit. But
Mhm.
he also doesn't look super fondly on this era. Like he even doesn't think super highly of his, technically proper debut that would follow Goblin. Like I remember him listening once. He would list off a few songs that he would keep, and he wouldn't keep the rest. So
Mhm.
Bastard going to streaming, I don't know. Maybe that'll have to be pushed by like his management, the Clancy's or something. I don't know. But if you think back on it or listen back to it, like we have, uh, obviously it's very in your face with the lyrics, man. This was a big thing about Tyler the Creator at the time and Odd Future at the time. They're misogynistic lyrics, they are homophobic lyrics,
Mhm.
it's like shock jock type stuff.
Mhm.
The horrorcore label was
Yep.
very quickly applied, and it can be hard to listen to at times. It's a product of its time. Like I just don't think like anyone gets as much attention in a positive light for that kind of stuff nowadays. I think that goes without saying. Uh, but it was really vulgar, and I think the songs have to like really be memorable to get past that. And for me, I think the big highlight is Ass Milk,
Yeah.
hilarious name with
Great
Earl,
name.
just because they
Mhm.
go back and forth trading verses. It's just some rapping ass shit, and yeah, they say some crazy stuff, which I guess is
Mhm.
also part of the appeal. It's memorable. Um, and Bastard was almost entirely self-produced by Tyler too. He's been doing this the whole time. It wasn't just Igor when he, you know, mixed,
Yeah, started doing it.
recorded, produced, rapped, everything. He's been doing basically everything the whole time. It started
Mhm.
right here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ass Milk probably is the standout. I really love the production choice of when Earl is rapping. It's a lot more like the smooth, like glimmery background, and then when it gets to
Mhm.
Tyler, that like rumble comes in. It's like he's rapping over this like more almost like demented type sound. It's really interesting, like back and forth touch. I thought, and then also BCR. And Wheels is a track that
Mhm.
stands out to me. It's just like this dreamy feel, and I think you can hear a little bit of that DNA of what you'll hear later on in like Flower Boy and Igor. So
Yeah.
the rest of it is a bit of a miss for me, but um, it's still for a first album I think pretty impressive because it's someone taking chances, doing things that not a lot of people at that time were even
Mm.
attempting to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think French got a lot of
Yeah.
like press attention as well, and I also like Odd Toddlers, which was like the last moment where Casey Veggies was actually part of Odd Future. He left the crew early on. But yeah,
Mhm.
Bastard. It's dated, but still, I think, kind of instructional as like a easy way to see the starting point. Because I
Mhm.
mean, at this time too, everyone else in OF was releasing tons of stuff. There were lots of Odd Future mixtapes at this time, and Tyler didn't quite coalesce to the clear upper echelon, and then Earl and Frank following, and like that didn't happen until I think when Goblin happens, when Yonkers in particular
Mhm.
happens. So Bastard is a bit of a like the precursor to everything.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of DNA between Bastard and Goblin. I think especially those like intro tracks that kind of set up like Tyler as like a troubled kid and like setting up these albums as like a dive into a troubled person's mind. Someone that's really has demented or um, not very clean thoughts, so to speak. Obviously Goblin comes out 2 years later, um, 2011 release, and this isn't self release. This is off XL Recordings, and I think you can hear a little bit more of the like production touches on this. Tyler still is like writing all this and producing. I think I think it's produced by Left Brain, right? This album, and I think
Some
he's
of
like
it, yeah.
collaborating with it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think Goblin is tough for me because I think when I went back to listen, I expected to really like kind of fall back and feel like yeah, like this brings me back to a time of music
Mhm.
that I should be very nostalgic for. And save for maybe like a couple of songs, I really felt like this was actually kind of a tough listen at points. And I think
Mhm.
it's because of a lot of the things you already spoke to, the horror core vibes on this. It's supposed to be, I think, a little bit challenging and inaccessible. Obviously, homophobic slurs are thrown throughout. There's talk of like violent rapes and things like that. So it's just kind of tough material at times, but I still think there's a handful of songs that really stand out to me. Obviously, Yonkers. I think She with Frank Ocean is a
Mhm.
clear standout. What about you going back and listening to Goblin though? Anything that stood out in particular?
Yeah, so like I've been saying, I kind of think about similarly to Bastard in terms of subject matter, in terms of the re-listenability feels like of a place, you know.
Yeah.
But Yonkers stands out because that was where like Tyler catapulted to. I had that song on my best top 10 songs of the 2010s that we did
Mhm.
at the end of 2019. And I think, again, even though many of the lyrics are dated and offensive to many, it's still kind of just captured a time, right? Like Sandwiches off this. That's the
Yeah.
first song they perform on Fallon, their TV debut, and they go nuts. It's actually really funny to look back on, which is, and there's like actually like an article about it about the risk that Fallon and crew took by bringing OF onto their show because the Fallon had only recently started, that iteration
Mhm.
of his late night show. It's funny again, funny to think about. She, you mentioned She, it's a good one. Right around this time, we're gonna get the debut mixtape from Frank, Nostalgia Ultra. But this is the first real memorable Frank
Mhm.
appearance for me because he's not too heavily featured in some of the earlier group projects. I don't even think he's on Radical at all. So that I think is a nice standout, and I believe that song has a video. I don't remember, but like they used to play that song all the time. And then I think just in terms of like humor, I really like Tron Cat. That's actually one of the songs that Tyler has reflected on still enjoying. But yeah, like Bastard, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of a tough hang. It can be really, the production can be really loud or grating, or just the lyrics. The consistency of the vulgarity
Mhm.
definitely I think requires a specific mood at the very least. So not
Yeah.
the easiest to go back to.
I want to shout out Nightmare as well. It has that like I don't know. Maybe it's a xylophone. I think it is in the background. It's kind of hard for me to totally identify that like bell type sound, but it really stands out. And Tyler just flows over that really well. But in thinking about Odd Future and Tyler, obviously around this time also they're starting to get notoriety as as personalities. And I think they got an MTV show, I think, at this time, or maybe it was I can't remember what network it was on, but it was like a prank type show.
Oh, Loiter Squad?
Yes, Loiter Squad.
Oh,
Thank
Adult
you.
Swim. Yeah.
Yes, Adult Swim. There you go. And I think really like being in this lane that was so bombastic, controversial, in your face, but also being a personality that was goopy and funny and very authentic to himself. I think really helped propel the music forward and propel him forward fame wise because he was unlike any other person at that time, unlike any other personality at that time. So even if maybe he reflects back on this music and doesn't feel like it's really the artist he sees himself as now, I think as like almost a stunt, like being this personality, putting this face forward, obviously really worked in a way. So I give him credit for that, at least, even if that wasn't necessarily intentional. But following the 2 year trend from Goblin, We move on to Wolf, right? And so this is also a thing. We have Bastard 2009, Goblin 2011. We have Wolf in 2013. And Wolf wasn't an album I really recalled digging into much. So going back and listening to it was really a pleasure. Um, I think the one thing I will say, brevity for Tyler has never really been his thing up until recently. And I think you can kind of hear a lot of his just like almost like fighting with himself in terms of like trying to fit all these pieces of his musical personality into one album every time. And I think in his more recent albums, he's been able to kind of lean one way or the other or have a little bit more focus. But Wolf is sprawling and a bit all over the place, but sometimes in the best way possible. There's a lot on Wolf. Do you remember listening to this for the first time?
Oh yeah, this is the first Tyler project I actively anticipated. Um, this is coming off the final Odd Future project, their the only album as a group, the Odd Future Tape Volume 2 from 2012. So at that point, I was, so into the thing. And it's so funny to reflect back on how fleeting the Odd Future Enterprise was, because you look at the subsequent albums following Wolf and the collaborations with, everyone else in the crew start to become very rare. And Wolf is kind of that last, like, celebration, if you will. And it seems like everyone is more or less on good terms now, but there was a little bad blood, I guess, as Odd Future faded away and Tyler became a star, and I think Sid became more and even Frank became more uh open about talking about some of the stuff they were insecure about Odd Future doing, namely all the vulgarity in the lyrics and homophobia
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of ups and downs as OF has disbanded, but it seems like everyone's in a good spot now. But again, this following the second Odd Future tape reminds me of like the last vestige of like the collective. And Wolf, I think it's like your first example of Tyler just evolving lyricism, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
still more or less a full on rap album. Like you get like I think one key sense of where Tyler's going to go in his future releases. That would be IFHY with Pharrell. I fucking hate you. That's a
Mm-hmm.
song that feels sonically very similar to stuff he would later do on Cherry Bomb, Flower Boy, and Igor. But everything else is more or less, the rapping, the bars.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying in terms of the IFHY. I think there's a lot of DNA there. It's it's interesting in listening to this, for the uh, first time in a couple of years. Uh, I was really just impressed with, um, like I guess like the way that, like you said, there's like this real shift in terms of Tyler as an artist. It feels like he's really like making a very conscious decision that, okay, I'm going to move more in this direction. It's almost like he kind of decided he wanted to be a little bit more vulnerable on this album, because I think you start to hear him talking about some things. I mean, it's kind of centered around this like three-person type relationship, and that's kind of like a running theme through some of the songs. But you know, you just hear the like a bit of that bite isn't as sharp, and I think that makes the music feel a little bit more accessible and made this almost like a reprieve after listening to Bastard and Goblin back to back. um for me, I had a couple of tracks that really stood out. I thought Pigs stood out to me as one of my favorite tracks for sure. I also really liked Domo 23. Just
That was
like
the lead
him,
single, I believe.
yeah, and him just going like super hard on that track. Um, thought Tamale, even though it's like back and I really just stood out as like a very unique song on this. Did you
Yeah.
like that one?
I never really cared for Tamale, but I remember. So I saw Tyler once when he opened up for Kid Cudi on the Cud Life tour in 2013. It was Cudi, Tyler, and Logic, early Logic. Great
Wow.
tour. And they did Tamale. Taco's the DJ, Jasper's the hype man, Tyler's obviously Tyler, and they lost their shit for Tamale, and everyone seemed to love it, but never not a song I like super got into, but I can obviously appreciate the energy it brings. Real quick on that show too, that was 2013, so like OF
Mhm.
is gonna go is already at death's door basically, but they still had a lot of that rambunctiousness, right? Like yes, they're losing some of the like Tyler's lyrics on Wolf have matured at least a
Mhm.
little bit, but they still have like kind of that punkish energy that everyone seemed to
Sure.
ascribe to them. And at that show, which is at like an outdoor open air arena with a roof kind of thing, so there's like fixed seats. Tyler, maybe like one song into his set, yelled at everyone to get up out of their seats and rush the stage, even though there was no like general admission pit area. It's all fixed seats. So everyone, including myself, everyone, we all go there, everyone's standing on the seats and stuff. They perform a song, they cut the audio, they meet the audio eventually, like, and he gets yanked off stage. And Cuddy comes out, not in full, like Moon Man costume before his set, and tells everyone that he loves Tyler too, but we all have to go back to our seats or they're gonna stop the show. So it's this really funny moment where like Tyler and Taco and Jasper were like, "Yo, let's burn it down," and then the institution's like, "Better not," and they didn't. Really fun,
Well,
really
funny.
fun memory.
Just a year later, he got arrested after he did basically the same thing at a South by Southwest
Mm,
show,
that's
and
right.
the charges were later dropped. But he told everybody to rush the stage, push past security. So this was a time when he was like that punkish energy you mentioned was still obviously thriving at his shows,
Yeah.
and it still comes through in the music at this time too, for sure.
Yep.
Any other highlights for you off Wolf?
Yeah, you mentioned Dumbo 23, which I think is really good. It's almost like a recap of his career to that point lyrically, but also really high energy. Great song. I like Jumbo and Haji. I like Slater with Frank. I think that's one of
Hmm.
Tyler's best hooks to that point. Me and Slater just hit a curb, something, something, listen to the nerd, like really catchy. Uh, I mentioned I fucking hate you. You mentioned pigs. I like Rusty, just as rap cut with him, Damo, and Earl. And then Trash Wang is really funny to me because that's like a meme song for like OF heads because it has Nickel Smith, the skateboarder who we know from mid 90s, Jasper, and Lucas, three noted not performer members of Odd Future. So it's like kind of like a joke song. And you mentioned
Yeah,
Tamale, which love it or hate it stands out. So I think
Tamale.
Wolf has a lot of fans to this day.
Yeah, Tamale reminds me of like an MIA cut,
Oh,
almost like
that's a good
the.
comp. Yeah.
But it's funny. Trash Wing stood out to me because it had a lot of like early Brockhampton feel to me. Like
Mm,
just
yeah.
a lot of like really raw energy coming through there. Um, I think it's definitely an interesting listen. It's long. I think could have been cut down a little bit. I think could have been sequenced a little bit better. But overall, I think Wolf is a great step in the right direction. And then 2 years later, we get Cherry Bomb, which, man, Tyler talks in a lot of interviews about his influences. He's mentioned Nerd as probably the biggest influence on his
Hmm.
career. Pharrell Williams and him have had a couple of collaborations together. He has mentioned people like Eminem, Kanye West, some of these big names. And I think Cherry Bomb is probably when you really start to see the nerd and the Kanye influence come out. Because I feel like there's certain songs here I was listening to and I was like, wow, this sounds like it could be right off Yeezus at times. And Yeezus obviously had come out just a year before. Or certain tracks that really just sound like homages to nerd really closely. But I felt like Cherry Bomb again was just another step in that progression towards being more accessible, being an artist that people could connect with more than earlier. Tyler, how did you feel
Hmm.
about it?
Yeah. So it's clearly a stepping stone to where he would go next. But I remember it being very polarizing at the time. And I remember myself, other friends that I had who were, big fans. Uh, I did not vibe with it super
Mhm.
heavy in the beginning. It was a change, you know. Looking back, I was surprised how easy of a listen I found a lot of it to be. And I think, post Flower Boy and Igor, that makes a lot of sense. But at the time, I was like, don't know if this is what I want from Tyler.
Yeah.
But you hear a lot of stuff that sounds familiar of what's to come. So with changing expectations, I think perception of the album has changed. And like I look online now, and it seems to have a much higher approval rating than I think it did, person to person when it first dropped. Because like it's like really loud, right? Like there's some like weird like production choices on Cherry Bomb, and not that like the early Tyler's stuff didn't great in a different way, but Cherry Bomb like sonically, it's like there's a few moments where like this is just kind of noise. Like I don't know, like is this like a created song, like But
Mhm.
looking back now, it's I think more of it hits than it didn't doesn't.
Yeah, I'm wondering for you, like, what were those production choices in particular that you were like unsure about or didn't feel like they were fully thought through?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Doesn't it start off really heavy on Death Camp? Like, I'm trying to remember what songs didn't last for me because like I remember more than anything the songs that I still do like,
Death
and always
Camp
did
is
at the
like,
time.
yeah, Death Camp is like overly like reverbed.
Yeah,
Kind of has those like dun 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 dun, but like almost like maxed out on the
yeah.
speakers kind of sound.
But like if you listen closer now, like you listen to Buffalo, which is a song I remember Tyler was really happy. He was like really hyping up the song on Twitter when it came out, the album. But Buffalo, that samples the Shake Your Booty sample that
Mhm.
has been sampled many times. Pusha T did it later with Numbers on the Board, for example. A song like The Brown Stains with Schoolboy Q, crazy beat, but they both rap their ass off. Smucker's got a lot of love at the time, of course. Kanye and Wayne, another kind of strange beat, I guess you could say. Do you have like a favorite song on Cherry Bomb? I've never really settled on a favorite song, just out of a group that I appreciate.
I don't know if there's one that I would say stands out above the rest, but I have probably like three that I definitely went back to the second I finished the album. Pilot with Sid Bennett, obviously, I
Mhm.
think is a clear standout. Those drums are just so like fun and like you really could listen to those all day. I think Smuckers is actually a really strong Kanye and Lil Wayne showing, which is like upon first listen really caught me off guard. It's kind of a long song and probably could have been a little shorter, but overall, it's just really like taken aback by that. And then sorry, Find Your Wings is
Mm.
like that jazzy type deal you're gonna get just one album later. So I felt like those three really stood out to me. I think whenever he kind of goes into that like acid jazz type feel, I totally vibe with it. But obviously, that's what we've been listening to a lot over the last 4 years. So,
Right.
um, any others that stood out to you, or do
I
you have
also
a
fucking young. It's a long song, but
yeah?
shares DNA with what's to come. So yeah, Cherry Bomb. I'd encourage a lot of people to go back to listen to Cherry Bomb because you might have found that your appreciation of it has shifted. I know mine has.
And then, Dave, this is the first time we got to speak about a Tyler album on the podcast, Flower Boy 2017. Uh, I believe it was on your end of the year
It was.
albums. I
Hmm.
believe it was on mine too, but maybe a little bit lower, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Um, but I think this is just like a real achievement in Tyler's career. Um, I kind of mentioned this is when I feel like his artistry became a lot more focused, and I think that's seen in a shorter track list, 45, 46 minute album that felt like he really was trying to like say something and get a point across. And you also hear Tyler opening up more, being more transparent about aspects of his own personal life. Obviously, sharing that he's had same-sex relations, same-sex relationships at times, which obviously thinking back to where his early work was quite the turn from some of those homophobic lyrics. So, I think there's a big, big shift here for Tyler. What stands out to you re-listening to this?
Yeah. And like, so obviously that was like the big narrative around Flower Boy's Tyler sexuality. Something he's never like openly spoken on, confirmed, even though
Mhm.
there are some tweets where he's like, I tried to come out 4 days ago and nobody cared. LOL. Like that tweet's still up. You could go see that. So there's like some, evidence, I guess, you know. It was always funny to me though, because like when Frank came out, before Channel Orange, I remember Earl and Tyler were like, "Fucking finally," It's like they knew, like they were boys. But Tyler himself, even hinting at something, uh, was received a little mixed bag, right? Given his history, like the LGBTQ plus community, I don't know. Not all of them were the most accepting of it because of his previous comments and what he had said. And I mean, that's for them to decide. But you listen to a song like Garden Shed,
Mhm.
the lyrics are the lyrics. Even Who Dat Boy, which is definitely still more of a rap song from him. There's some more suggestions there. Uh, but overall, Flower Boy, like you mentioned, the production has starkly changed from where we started.
Mhm.
Much more jazz infused, just less like mainstream hip hop beats or even like weird like underground hip hop beats. And it's it's quite pleasant music. Now the thing about Flower Boy for me is I don't like run back a lot of the songs all that often. It's more of like a general appreciation for the body of work. You know,
Mhm.
Garden Shed, Boredom, 911 Mr. Lonely, really beautiful songs. Not songs I listen to all the time. I think See You Again with Kali Uchis probably the biggest hit off this.
Yeah.
That Boy with Rocky. And I guess I Ain't Got Time had a bit of a run too. But for me, it's more about the appreciation and you just seeing again the continued evolution and not something I think people were expecting post Cherry Bomb. Again, looking back in hindsight, it's easier to see now. But at the time, this was truly like a landmark moment in Tyler's solo career.
Yeah. It's I agree with you. I think this is an album that really works as an album, but I think individually the songs don't necessarily pop the same way some of the earlier singles do, and I think some of the tracks off Igor do. But I think especially in terms of expectation of Tyler, in terms of artistry, just is a total achievement, a total triumph, and definitely some work I'm impressed with. I don't really know if there's like even that much more to say. I think everybody kind of just accepts that this is a really strong showing from Tyler. I think you hit on a lot of the songs that stood out to me. I think November also really stands out, as well as Enjoy Right Now, today. I think it's the closing track, but um, overall, there's really not a bad song on the album. And you can go back and listen to our review of that Nostalgia on YouTube. But we recently, 2 years ago, spoke about Igor, and I think Igor, for me, to step on my list just a little bit, it's really high up there. Is really high up there because I feel like it takes a lot of what Tyler did on Flower Boy, make a really cohesive album, piece of art, but adds tweaks that just hit more for what I want to hear from Tyler, what I'm more interested in music wise. I think there's just some really exciting production choices throughout this that just make it top notch. Whether it's like some of the like rumbling bass on Earthquake, or the like slow like R&B build up on Are We Still Friends, like there's just some moments on this that I'm just really like, man, that's why I love music right there.
Right, and a lot of the mixing in sequence is special too, one song playing into the next. All really
Mm-hmm.
intentional. Again, something that was done completely by Tyler. Yeah, I kinda have similar thoughts where it's the next step for Flower Boy because I think this is music that's similar, but at least to me, I think it's easier to pick out, like, singles and stuff to go back to, like Earthquake, obvious highlight here, one of his biggest songs of his career. I
Mm-hmm.
remember at this time we get the blonde wig aesthetic
Yeah.
thing, very popular Halloween costume in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just like a lot of those songs, Earthquake, I think, A
A
Boy
boy
Is a
is a
Gun,
gun. Yeah.
yeah, like they're really awesome to go back to, but it also a part of this really beautiful piece as an
Mm-hmm.
album. And this was my number one album of 2019. Still really happy about that. And I just remember being really excited when I first listened to it, coming off Flower Boy. Just being like, yeah, no, this is like definitely the direction Tyler's been going on, but it also like really hits moment to moment, which is kind of what I wanted more from after Flower Boy. So I know a lot of people like Flower Boy more than Igor. I think it's nothing wrong with that, but to me, Igor is just 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 hits in a special way, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned that like sequencing of the production, and um, there's not really a lull. There are times when the tracks might be slower, they might be toned down, but it's almost immediately followed by something that's a little bit faster, a little bit comes through a little bit harder. And I think just for my own personal taste and for what I want to be hearing from Tyler, that really works for me. Funny because even one of the shortest song on here, the shortest track is only 14 seconds, but exactly what you run from, you end up chasing. It's just basically like this little like vocal, but I just feel like it works so well on the album. Like listening through, I was like, wow, that's just like such an interesting like like between track like intro, but it just felt like it fit. And for something that small to really stand out to me was just really nice on listen through. Um, you know, I think one thing I just wanted to go back to because we forgot to mention it, but in those early come ups, I think there were two moments that we both agreed upon really elevated Tyler in terms of his status, and that was back when he was featured on a good music track with Pusha T, "Trouble on My Mind."
Yeah.
Do you remember listening to that for the first time?
Yeah, because well, you get two really big moments in 2011. I believe those are the first features Tyler did outside of the Odd Future orbit. Trouble on My Mind, Pusha T, and Martians vs. Goblins, the game song featuring Tyler and Wayne, and both just like lyrical dexterous masterpieces to me. I love them as guest features because it was Tyler bringing all his energy, but like distilling it down to not like overtake a song or anything. Still fitting. Um, Really awesome. Yeah, I mean, so some of those are some of my favorite songs of like the early 2010s. Honestly,
Yeah, I agree. Trouble on My Mind, especially, just really stands out to me as a song I remember playing back a lot at that time, and I still do. It's such a great track. Um, and
and
I just feel like thinking about Tyler's verse on that, it's like one of the first times, other than Yonkers, I remember Tyler really just standing out to me as like, wow, this guy can like go with the best of them, and to see where he's kind of come from that moment. I don't. I'd be interested to see if he could, steal a song like that again. We don't hear him doing like a ton of features sometimes, or sometimes we'll hear a guest
yeah,
track every once in a while, but it just was like a really cool moment looking back his career.
and that's the thing. He doesn't do a lot of features, but he does have a lot of memorable ones to me. Like, there's only like I think he has probably like less than 30 features over 10 years. It's not a lot. But after Trouble in My Mind and Martians vs. Goblins, and again, discounting anything with Odd Future, you just have some moments that pop up, and some of it's actually like his own doing. Like he just kind of would release random songs. Like
Mhm.
recently, Potato Salad, Best Interest. Those are some of his most popular songs on streaming. Funny enough, Ziploc comes to mind. Sometimes these were just YouTube videos, non-streaming. But I mean, recently, something to rap about. Off Alfredo from Freddie Gibbs, memorable
Right.
feature. TD, the Little Yachty Tier Whack, ASAP Rocky song off Little Boat 3 last year. Also 327 off Pray for Paris, West Side Gun song with Joey Badass and Tyler. Like he had three, I think, really noticeable ones in 2020. But other than that, like 2016, one of my favorites as well. Telephone Calls, the Cozy Tapes Volume One, ASAP Mob Cut, really memorable song. I remember a few times he like came out at ASAP's sets to perform that as a guest. Really fun. And that's another thing too is like the friendship between Tyler and ASAP Mob and Schoolboy Q and the rest of Black Hippie.
Hmm.
Also really cool to see. Obviously, Mac Miller was also in that orbit when he was still with
Yeah.
us. So um, yeah, man, Tyler's dope, and
Yeah. I agree.
hoping that what we've seen, as we mentioned at the top, is an inkling of a new album cycle. It is every 2 years. 2021. It is time for a new one. If that was to hold, it wouldn't have held it against him. But then again, he seems like someone who would just be up to something during quarantine in terms of
Yep.
recording. So he probably had more time, not less. So we shouldn't be surprised at all, given his work ethic. So a really exciting time.
Yeah, it just in reflecting on where he was when we first tuned into him and where he is now, I think he's a really satisfying artist to follow because, especially being 30 years old now and just kind of being similar in age, it feels a bit like we kind of grew up with him, and we yeah, we went from being these kids who were in college or high school when Bastard dropped, and he was obviously a not well refined person at that point in terms of his uh, thoughts and lyrics and
Mhm.
what he's putting out. And to see where he got to just feels like we almost like grew and matured with him. So just really cool to reflect on his career overall. But we gotta get to rankings here, Dave. For me, pretty clearly at the bottom for me are Bastard and Goblin. Anyone that was listening to this probably expected that. I have Bastard 6 and Goblin 5. Looks like you have the same.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Just going back, it's like plenty to appreciate about it, but at the end of the day, it's less refined and dated. So not being negative, it's just Tyler has made steady progress as an artist. So that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Um, I had Cherry Bomb fourth. It looks like you had it third and flipped that with Wolf, which I had third. So
Yeah,
they were
so
close for me.
I think I'm gonna change this. I was thinking about this. I was like, do I do exact literal reverse order for my list? And the more I think about it, I like to listen to more songs off Wolf than I do Cherry Bomb. And even though I have
Yeah.
this greater appreciation of Cherry Bomb today than I did in 2015, I still think I should have Wolf ahead of it. So yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like we both have Bastard, Goblin, 6 and 5. And then we have Cherry Bomb and then Wolf 4 and 3. And then our top two are exactly the same. Our lists are exactly the same. Flower Boy, um, really 1B, but if having to go by this, it would be number 2 for me. And Igor is number 1 for me pretty clearly. Just listen to our review and just going back, I think it's evident how we feel
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. And now this new album, if we are getting a new album, it is tough to continue to top yourself.
Yeah.
And if Tyler was to top even just Flower Boy or just Igor to some people, that would be a huge accomplishment, right?
Hmm.
Because those are two like really great records he's already made. So I don't think the pressure's on at all. Like I think it's just everyone's just happy to get more. But if he was to somehow get to the top of the list once again with a new album, that'd be something.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to hear whatever he has coming out. Um, and I think he's also a person, he's has hands in a lot of things like directing music videos or, like I think he actually makes or at least has a big hand in the covers of his albums. He's really
Mhm.
all over it. I could see him doing other things in the future, whether that's, making television or directing, things like that.
Right. Well, he's already been very heavily involved in the fashion world with the golf brand. So I think it's clear he has other interests. There's a really funny video of ASAP Rocky making fun of Tyler when they're together because of his interest in cars. Got to get the McLaren, man. Like, go look up ASAP Rocky, Tyler McLaren. It's so funny. So Tyler's a multifaceted dude. So how could you pin him down? Yeah, do you think he'll return the TV one day after Loiter Squad? I think he would because Loiter Squad also is a bit a product of the past. So getting today's Tyler doing some kind of reality show or something would be cool too.
Yeah, I agree. Tyler, uh, a fun artist to talk about. I'm glad we did this. We'll be back next week talking about quite a bit to catch up on. But go back and listen to our Tyler reviews, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. Give us your thoughts, comment below, or tweet us at nostalgiapod on Twitter. And yeah, go listen to Lumberjack. It's a really
Mm-hmm.
good song.
Yeah,
So
and also check those Drake, J. Cole, and Brockhampton album rankings we've done recently as well.
check it out. We'll see you next week.